man loses his father and returns to work the next day. A man signs the paperwork for a divorce and pretends like nothing's wrong. We tend to look at these men and we think they're strong, they're stoic. But sometimes what looks like strength is actually denial. Why do we pretend we're okay when we know we're not? Why do we struggle to admit that something's wrong? And why do we tell everyone we're fine? Well, welcome to Stand Firm Daily, where we build compassion, empathy, and Christ-like character in men. If you're struggling in life, hit like and subscribe and join us on this journey. Now, when we talk about grief, we tend to describe the first stage of grief as denial. But denial is often misunderstood. Denial is not always refusing that something happened. Sometimes denial is ignoring exactly what happened, but struggling to accept what it has done to us. A man can know that his father's died. A man can know that his marriage is ended. Maybe a man's lost his job. Maybe a child has grown up and left home. Or maybe a man walks through a faith crisis. We may know our life has changed, but struggle to admit that the loss has changed us. Denial is often our mind's way of protecting us from the shock of the loss. Those first moments of grief can feel like the world has stopped making sense, like our life is falling apart. The future feels impossible, and we're left wondering, how can I keep going? How do I live with this? How do I wake up tomorrow and do normal things when nothing seems right? In those moments, denial can become grace. It allows us to experience grief in pieces and in moments instead of all at once. It's as if our heart was saying, I can only carry so much today. And sometimes that's exactly what we need. But eventually, denial has to give way to reality. Because when we refuse to acknowledge what happens, it finds a way back into our lives in either healthy or unhealthy ways. Now, for many men, grief comes out sideways. And in my work as a chaplain, I've seen how grief has come out in men in many different ways. Maybe they stay constantly busy. Maybe they work long hours. Maybe they scroll endlessly on social media. Maybe they drink until they're numb. Maybe they serve everyone else while ignoring their own needs. Maybe they joke about what hurts. Maybe they just say, I'm fine. Now, the problem isn't that these things happen or that we cope in these ways necessarily. The problem is when we hide that they're there. When temporary survival becomes permanent avoidance. The first step towards healing is to recognize where you're at. You need to ask yourself, am I grieving something that I've never allowed myself to feel? Many men don't deny the loss, but they deny the wound. They say, I don't want to talk about it. I'm over it. I just need to move forward. Often what we call stress is actually grief. Sometimes what we call being tired is really just grief telling us that we've been carrying our grief too long alone and that we need support. Now, one of the ways we can cope with grief is to reveal it. And we can turn to God in honest prayer and lift up the petitions of our heart to Him. Now, David understood what it meant to carry a heavy and broken heart. In Psalm 32, David writes, When I kept silence, my bones waxed old through my roaring all the day long. Now, notice what David doesn't say. He doesn't say, I wasn't hurting. What he says is, I kept silent. His hidden pain began to affect his whole person, body, mind, and soul. David discovered what many of us who grieve eventually learn. What we hide from others, we cannot hide from God. Now, the word of hope is that God doesn't expect us to hide our grief from Him. He invites us to bring it to Him. We see this pattern back in the Garden of Eden. Now, after Adam and Eve had hid, God said, Where art thou? Now, God wasn't asking because He didn't know where Adam was. He was inviting Adam out of hiding. inviting him into relationship, inviting him to bring his fear, his shame, and his heartbreak before God. Now, God still asks that question to grieving men today. Where art thou? Now, not because he doesn't know, but because he's inviting you to him to be healed. This week, don't try to fix your grief. Don't rush past it. Don't pretend it isn't there. Simply name it. Write one sentence that begins with, I am grieving, ... and then answer that. Then take that sentence to God in prayer. Now, denial says, I'm fine. Faith says, Lord, this is where I really am. Now remember, God doesn't meet us after we're healed. God meets us in the middle of our broken heart and contrite spirit. God meets us in our grief. And healing begins when we stop hiding from God and we allow him to walk with us through our path of grief. Hey, thanks for taking a moment to take care of your heart and nurture your soul. Let's walk this path together. Hit like and subscribe. Let's stand firm daily. Godspeed, brothers.